My name is Scout Tufankjian. I am a photojournalist. I work for a lot of news magazines. I also do kind of large-scale personal projects. I was born in kind of halfway between Boston and Cape Cod. I was born in Whitman. My dad's family was one of the only Armenian families in town, and my grandmother and great-grandmother used to walk along the side of the road picking grape leaves for Yalanji, and my dad would be like, "Can't you just be American?" I didn't grow up kind of embedded in an Armenian community in the way that a lot of my friends have. The population would double in the summertime, so there were Armenian families that spent the summers there, and we would have kef at their house in Khorovats on the weekends. And then occasionally we would go into church bazaars in Watertown or, Armenian picnics and things like that. Typical small town American-ish childhood. I had always known I wanted to be a journalist because I'm nosy and I like to know what happens next, and I'm curious and I like to kind of figure out what's going on. But I was in my junior semester abroad in Northern Ireland, and I was doing my thesis project on the police accountability structure and community identity reasons for why it doesn't work. Like basically, cops are racist. One community is policed differently than the other community. And one of my friends who lived there said, "Listen, Scout, you can interview as many people as you want, but you're not going to actually get it until you see it." And a week later was this event where there's a march and then there's kind of a counter-protest. The streets were blocked off and you kind of had two choices. You could either riot or you could take pictures. And I felt like rioting in someone else's country is a little lame. And so I started photographing and I loved it. And not only did I love it, the pictures that I was taking said more about the issues that I was trying to discuss in this paper than kind of 75 pages of writing. So I had been living in Gaza off and on for 4 years, and this was 2006, and I was pretty burnt out after the 2006 Operation Summer Rain's war, and I kind of needed a break. So I came back to the States. First news event I worked on coming back to the States was the Amish school shooting, which was less of a break than I had kind of planned on. My agency asked if I would go photograph a book signing by the then junior senator from Illinois up in New Hampshire. I'd been in Gaza for the DNC, so I hadn't actually seen his speech, but I'd heard it was a big deal, and I'd read a New Yorker article about him. Like most people, I thought 2016, he'll start to become relevant. He's supposed to be an interesting guy, whatever. And that was kind of the extent to which I knew anything about Barack Obama. I didn't want to drive up to New Hampshire. I had a date that weekend with my boyfriend, and I wanted to stay in New York and go on a date. I didn't want to drive up to New Hampshire. I certainly didn't want to shoot it on spec, which means that, you maybe get paid if you get a really good picture, but it's a book signing, so you're not going to get a really good picture. I didn't like politicians. I didn't like New Hampshire that much, and I don't like book signings. But he walked in, and people just lost their minds. He had great presence. He was clearly intelligent. He's incredibly charismatic. People really like him. If this campaign turns out to be something, this could be this incredible moment in American history, a country founded on slavery, possibly electing a black man as a nominee or, getting far. I had no idea that he was actually going to become president of the United States, but who did in November, December 2006, except probably Barack Obama. I was the only photographer to cover the entirety of his campaign, certainly the only freelancer. So towards the end of the election, I was perfectly placed to do a book on the campaign, which I did. The Amazon link for the book went live on election day. And they were like, let's get this into stores before Christmas and before he becomes president and starts pissing people off. Let's sell this while everyone loves him. So the book did really well. And then in 2012, I got a phone call from the campaign saying, listen, Scout, we would love you to to come on board in 2012 as the campaign photographer. The main difference was, in 2006 and 7, really early on, it was me in a rental car, he's in a minivan, he's got like a security guy, and now it's an 18 vehicle convoy with Air Force One. The first campaign I just look at pictures of myself from then, I'm wearing like cut off skater shorts and a tank top and like ripped up sneakers, and I'm in business casual because he's the president. And there's no one more colorful than a colorful Armenian, and my grandfather was a colorful Armenian. I have this picture of him in the book, and he's got a dog in one hand and a goat in the other hand. They would spend weekends house hunting, and then they would stop off at all their different Armenian friends' houses, and for a cup of suraj or for some tea, and then they would kind of gossip for a little while, and I would just flip through the Armenian newspapers and magazines on the table because I thought the grown-up talk was super boring. And that's kind of where I got the idea for the Diaspora Project, is one of these magazines had this map of the world with different, here there be Armenians, basically. And I just remember my tiny mind being completely blown by, Armenians in Kolkata or Syria or Buenos Aires, or just all these places around the world. I travel enough for work, and so I kind of started out working on it kind of piecemeal. I would be photographing the Egyptian Revolution, and then afterwards I'd go to Alexandria to photograph the Armenian community there. Or before I flew back for some elections, I stopped in Ethiopia. I really wanted it to come out in the spring of 2015 because I wanted us to be able to celebrate our survival at the same time that we were mourning our losses. One of the things I am most grateful for in this project is that Syria and Lebanon were two of the first places I went with this project, as opposed to leaving it till later, because the Syria community is, the real heart of the Middle Eastern Armenian diaspora, probably the diaspora as a whole. And so the fact that it has been completely decimated by the brutality of the Syrian civil war is heartbreaking on so many levels. I mean, what's happening in Syria is heartbreaking for everyone involved. We're a small part of that. People talk about how this community has not assimilated and this community has assimilated, and it's bull. Like, every community has been affected by their new adopted homeland. Armenian culture wasn't this unchanging thing from, however, 4000 BC until, April 23rd, 1915. It changed, and it continues to change, and that's not a bad thing. If we kind of monumentize and memorialize ourselves, then the culture will die out because people will be afraid of doing it wrong. I think it is true that the kind of old definitions of the tiny box you had to fit in to be a good Armenian, that's kind of been blown open. This idea that to be Armenian, you have to have 2 Armenian parents, go to Armenian school, belong to one of the organizations, go to church, marry an Armenian of the opposite gender, and be successful in a kind of very specific field. The younger community is not so interested in, oh, you don't count. They're much more open. And I think that's really important, because when you start creating these boundaries, when you start drawing a circle around the good Armenians and leaving out the others, people feel really alienated. The amot, the shame doesn't really influence people to get involved. It makes people want to hide. And so the fact that the younger members of the community are like, amoche, I think is really important. And I think it bodes really well for our future.